thank you so much for having me. This is great to be here, and it's exciting. It's wow, just kicking things off. I'm really sad I missed the last talk, but thankfully there will be recordings later. So, yeah, so I assume, are most of you from Kansas City? Nice, yeah. All right, so this is my first time here. So I just got in last night, and I'm hoping to get some more time to just explore just today, tomorrow, before I fly out. But I'm really loving it so far. And I feel like there was supposed to be pretty good weather today, but I kind of like the ambiance we have going on. It's like the totally white sky, it's sort of humid, interesting, yeah. Yeah, so my name is Natalie Lunbeck, and I work at Shipyard. We're a small startup. We do like ephemeral environments as a service, and I wanted to talk about something today that I personally find very interesting. I think it's, CI/CD and keeping that continuous. And I mean, I know for a fact that everyone here absolutely knows what CI/CD is, and everyone's doing it. Although I feel like there's, yeah, no, exactly. I feel like that's where the laughter comes in, is because there's a certain thing we want to achieve with CI/CD, and sometimes we're not quite there. And I think that we know why we're not there. And I think there was a very, very valuable answer last night at dinner. I think this was Jeremy who said that, but it's always people. And yeah, I think any DevOps problem can be narrowed down to that. So I think especially with CI/CD, kind of like where we're standing with it now, where we want to be, and what the common blockers are. So I will get into it. All right. All right, there we go. All right, so CI/CD, at its core, it's both a principle and it's a literal pipeline that, of course, runs on any major code changes. And I think that the issue here is sometimes many people are getting the pipeline right, but they're not quite fulfilling the promises set forth by the principle. And by a principle, at its core, it should mean things like frequent testing. You should be able to automate ops tasks like builds, tests, lints, deploys, things that don't really make sense for a human to do, because of course any context switching is kind of a constraint. We don't do well with that, but if you can get all these things done automatically and on certain code events, you save so much time. So yeah, frequently testing and making sure that any commits you have are so small that they can, committing anything that's standalone enough to be able to function itself in the main once you push that and test that. And that's just keeping agile, keeping current, and making sure that you're not falling too far behind. And that's the thing, is there are some common blocks to CI/CD. This is where the continuous tends to fall out of it. And a lot of that is, okay, so obviously CI/CD is, as the pipeline itself is automated, and you can't automate every part of it. And I think even with generative AI, humans are still a blocker, and that's a good thing. I really don't want an LLM doing my code reviews or my approvals. I don't trust it. I don't think I will anytime soon. So of course humans are going to be a part where the CI/CD stops being continuous. There's also the issue of flaky and failing tests. Flaky tests are annoying because there's really no rhyme or reason why they're not pulling through. And at that point, you're halting your build pipeline. You're not sure, if you can really trust a certain deployment. And then, of course, failing tests, that also brings things to a halt, very obviously, as well as merge and dependency conflicts. And if you're, working on something a little bit too long, spending too many days on a feature, it just becomes too far behind your main, and it's really difficult to reintegrate. And that's really annoying. I really hate resolving merge conflicts when I have to deal with that. It's not my favorite part. I feel like it makes me just lose my flow, and I'm like, okay, I really should have done this sooner. And then also dev QA staging environment bottlenecks, because at the end of the day, CI/CD is all about frequent testing, and you can't really get that frequent testing if you don't have anywhere to test something. And you want thorough testing, and you want testing before merge, and that's difficult. And then of course manual rollbacks, and that's something that is a lot easier to work with once you have something like blue-green deployment set up, but of course that's not quite trivial. So if you're having unreliable stuff merged into your main, you really you really don't want that to be happening. You want to find out a lot sooner. And so there's this great resource out there that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but Brian Finster maintains this guide called minimumcd.org, and it was very valuable for me to find this guide and also just like talk to him about it, like how he is kind of redefining what CI/CD should be. And I appreciate that it's so opinionated, because in it, I do feel like it does set a high standard that many organizations are not able to quite achieve, like the level of CI/CD that is recommended by the guide, but I think it's something that we can all strive for. And of course, it gets more difficult with scale. But there are some like simple ways that I think come down to, at the end of the day, they come down to people and culture within your org. And one of, I think, the easiest ways is doing trunk-based development. And of course, I mean, this is, when I'm working with a team, this is what I like to do, but I feel like when I'm working alone, I tend to, go feature-based development just is so much easier. But this is just, the practice of integrating smaller code changes into main daily or more often. And as minimumcd.org says, if you're not pushing to main every single day, you're not doing CI/CD. And I know that that's controversial. I don't know what the consensus on that is here, but I think that that's a good way to define it. And just by doing these small code changes and reducing conflicts and making sure that you're keeping up to date and not spending multiple days on any given branch, you are making it a lot easier for you to merge these changes in and to not be further behind any code changes that your team has done, especially if you're working on a part that's heavily worked on by the rest of your team. And I mean, we all know how this works, but it's just branches start from the trunk, they reintegrate to the trunk, and then they get deleted. They're short-lived. They're not really designed to live for more than a few days at a time. And then as you would do this, is you would test every branch individually, merge the branch into main, and then test the main with all the branches merged together. And I mean, I know we all know what this looks like, but I think that it's really drives the point home to see a picture that your branches are not originating off of other feature branches. They're just originating off of the trunk. And they merge in, and there's very few things for them to conflict with. And of course, I mean, this sounds a little bit obvious, and I know that like in some capacity, like with CI/CD, we're all testing before merge to some extent, and maybe this is, running your unit tests. It's difficult. So in theory, it's obvious. In practice, it is tricky, and mostly that's because you need like a full-fledged environment stood up on every branch, and that's obviously non-trivial, because you need, like, if you want to be running the same quality, same type of tests that you're running on your more infrastructure-forward environments. So what you would ideally do is you would have this spun up, you would test on every single code change until it's bug-free, have it rebuild, and then merge, and then once the branches are integrated again, you would test again. And this is, the question is, how continuous is your CI/CD actually? And this picture is a nightmare. And I know at first glance it doesn't seem like inherently uncontinuous, but when you take a closer look, you realize that there can be multiple days between each stage on this. And I mean, so this is just like several developers working on their feature branches at a time, a single staging environment, and typically your flow would typically look like a developer working on a branch until they've completed it. They open a pull request, they run their unit tests, linters, anything automated, at which point like they'll loop in a peer for code review who will maybe try to recreate that local environment. It will get merged to main, deployed to staging, and that seems fine enough. But when you realize at the end of the day it's being deployed, this is, after several days have passed, alongside maybe, in this image, 3, but sometimes like 5, 9, 12 other branches at a time. And these are all tested, with your very, very robust end-to-end integration tests against the staging environment, which is, if you're lucky, a pretty good approximation of production. But these tests are only uncovering the bugs in every single branch, and that's going to be kind of a nightmare for the QA team, because they're going to go through, they're going to look through, and they're going to see, okay, I think I found out what went wrong, and they're going to let you know, hey, your branch broke staging, can you go back and fix it? And that's annoying because, obviously it took you a few days to get your branch in there, and you were probably walking on eggshells trying not to break the staging environment to begin with. But yeah, you'll do that again, you'll iterate, you'll fix the bug, you'll loop in your peer again, who's probably not ready for another code review at this point. It's been the same exact thing, like what went wrong? And that will get deployed and tested along with a bunch of other things. And you can see that this is really difficult to have confidence in your deployments at this point, because yeah, it's all these bugs that are happening that could be discovered sooner, and it's just kind of bottlenecking, and that's how things tend to add up very quickly. And there is a way to kind of preserve continuity and to do this, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is with ephemeral environments, and I feel like everyone is at the stage where they either have built this out internally or they have it very, very far ahead on their roadmap, or maybe you're doing it now, which is great. And basically, in short, ephemeral environments are short-lived standalone deployments of an app. They try to be as production-like as possible. They're generally on a more lightweight cluster, maybe K3s, but they should have like your integrations, like some approximation of your database, the same dependencies. They should be on demand. They're typically like GitOps enabled. They spin up when you need them. They're gone when you don't. And they're secure, isolated from other environments. And I mean that they're not necessarily sharing any services or dependencies because they really, they shouldn't be. That's just another vulnerability. And if your ephemeral environments are as easy to take down as staging, then that's kind of a problem. All right, so there it is, test before merge. And this is what it would look like as a graphic. And you can see that we did shift something left. I know that term is not everyone's favorite because that does usually mean that there's more work for everyone else. But we do have the same 3 feature branches being iterated on at the same time. When you're working, you open a pull request. But this time, what's different is your pull request will spin up an environment. It will be something triggered by GitOps. And that will also trigger a run of your CI/CD pipeline. And you can bring your CI/CD pipeline, ideally. The best practice way would be to bring the same one that you're using in staging and production, bring it here, and this environment should be such a good approximation that it should deliver the same result. And so then all your tests will run there, and if if anything fails, you can fix it right then and there on the spot, ideally. And then once you've passed that, then you can bother your peer for code review. I mean, that's the perfect time for that because, they shouldn't be tasked with finding any of your bugs. They should just be looking for like last-minute best practices. And then at that point, you can really confidently merge to main. This can be a small code change. You can be using trunk-based development. You can do this multiple times per day because there's really no wait for it. And then you will have your multiple branches that are merged at the same time, and then your full end-to-end test suite, as it should go through, and it should just check for any bugs that happen when these features are interacting, rather than any bugs that are inherent to the features themselves. So then you can have, a much shorter loop, and instead of, something taking like a little over a week, I guess depends on the size of your org, how often you're pushing things to staging. This can be done multiple times per day, and that's really like how you close that inner loop there. And yeah, here are a few bottlenecks. I know that this first one is controversial. I know I say it's inherently bad, but no, there are smart ways to test in production. I mean, if you're using like canary releases or feature flagging, you can do this, but a lot of the time people are testing in production just because they don't necessarily have the infrastructure that they trust to test in pre-production. And I get that. I think that sometimes it makes sense. You want to have something you want to see how something performs against your actual infrastructure in case instead of something with mocked services. But this becomes bad when it's kind of your last resort and you're doing it because you don't have the other infrastructure available. And what was I going to say here? Oh yeah, there was a good point that my colleague made. He was saying, like, if your users aren't signing up for your beta program, like, would you necessarily want them finding a bug in production? And that seems a little bit obvious to me if you're not being smart about feature flagging, canary releases. And then, of course, there's not enough staging in test environments to go around, which means that if you are, like maybe you're doing a big front-end overhaul, and maybe 90% of the time you only really need to test your back-end changes. But in cases like this, you'll have to really walk on eggshells when making these changes. You'll have to wait for the staging environment to do this, and that's when that can really, bring your release process to a halt. And yeah, so if you're a complex app with services, integrations, and database, it can't be tested soon enough, and that's going to make it really difficult to, keep up with the current roadmap that you have promised. And so I wanted to go into a little bit of a personal anecdote. So before I started at Shipyard, my first time ever contributing to a large application, we only had a staging environment, and we didn't have any CI/CD. Nothing was automated. So I had a big code change. This is my very first pull request that I had submitted to that, and it was, of course, an application that was much too difficult to test on my local machine. So I opened the pull request, and then of course a few days later it eventually got manually deployed to staging, and it broke the staging environment. And it was really difficult because they had to roll back the staging environment. This took a few more days, and I kind of had to start from scratch. I couldn't necessarily find out where I went wrong. I didn't have visibility into where the tests failed. So this was very unhelpful for me. But when I joined Shipyard 3 years ago as an intern, I learned about ephemeral environments, and this was great, but it was really difficult because I don't know if 3 years ago there wasn't any really non-internal information out there on ephemeral environments, nothing regarding best practices or how you should do this, how you build this. This is stuff that had been, it's many companies have their own knowledge bases that are of course talking about this, but yeah, we were really, I feel like I really started from scratch with this. So I talked to some industry professionals, people who have been pioneering this stuff, people who have been building this out, and I compiled a community project, which is on GitHub. I'm always looking for contributors, but it's just a community resource for ephemeral environment best practices, how you should be doing this the right way. And I'll talk a little bit about that. It's been great, always looking for contributors, and I definitely want to expand this, especially over the next few months. But at the end of the day, we came down to 6 pillars that are pretty important, pretty crucial, everything that ephemeral environments should be. And one of those first things is that they should promote collaboration. You should be able to not just collaborating with your other developers, but also collaborating across teams. You should be able to work with product people. They should be able to, instead of doing a screen share, they should be able to have the environment right then and there. You should be able to maybe give these to salespeople. So if they're a solutions architect, if they need to build out a demo, a custom solution for someone, they can show them right then and there instead of tying up a staging environment. Stuff like that. And then testing, you should be able to, these should be GitOps enabled. They should be robust enough that they can really handle your entire test suite. They should be secure, and I mean this both in a way that they should be isolated from other environments, but you also should not be handling any of the sign-in logic. You should be kind of using an SSO provider, GitHub, GitLab, Google, some way that you're sure that, if some vulnerability happens, that's, Google's fault, not yours. And it's important stuff. And then also you should be using definitely a sanitized version of your production data set. I would sanitize it probably more than you think you need to, because even if you take away any PII, it's still really easy to use all the other columns, especially in a big data application, to trace back to any one person. And then the dev workflow, they should be up to date with every code change, which means that you open the PR, they build, they're there, and then they rebuild on every commit after. You shouldn't have to intervene if you're building this the right way. You should be able to do this all automatically. Cost control, they use the cloud in an elastic way, which means that they scale to 0 when not in use. And that's absolutely very important, because if you're paying for 24/7 staging, that adds up. And that's probably the reason why you can't have as many environments as you want, because you have these 4 very expensive environments. And then, of course, on demand, they should operate independently, completely hands-off, something that your DevOps team shouldn't need to worry about. They're just there when you need them, they're gone when you don't, and it's all for the best. Yeah, so I wanted to thank you very much, and of course also open the floor to questions. And I'm always happy to chat. I mean, I'll be here all day. I'll be here tomorrow. I'm super excited. This is, been looking to be an amazing conference. So it's great to be here, and always happy to connect. You can, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me, natalie@shipyard.build. And if you're interested in learning more, check out ephemeralenvironments.io. It's I would love to hear anyone's thoughts on it, how we can make this better, and how we can build this out. All right, thank you very much.